Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's Novedge webinar. Today's webinar is about productivity techniques in Vectorworks 2019. Vectorworks is extremely powerful when you use it correctly. There are many productivity techniques that you can use to make Vectorworks faster. But it's not just about customizing Vectorworks. There are many basic techniques that will make you faster. And Jonathan believes that these are the tools and techniques that you need to learn. So if you do learn these tools and techniques, you will find that it's not just more productive to use Vectorworks, you will also find that it's more fun. And let me tell you a little bit about Jonathan. Jonathan Pickup is an architect trained in New Zealand and in the UK with more than 30 years of experience. He has been writing and producing Vectorworks manuals and providing customer support for more than 15 years. His company, ArchonCAD, is the premier provider of third-party manuals and training resources for Vectorworks. He also runs the Vectorworks Online User Group and provides its main direction. And I want to let you know that if you go to ArchonCAD.com, you'll see a great brand new website. So lots of resources, lots of videos. You're gonna love it. Now let me tell you a little bit about us, Novedge. Novedge is one of the largest online stores for design software, and we offer a huge assortment of solutions for every designer's needs. So I want to urge you to come visit Novedge and check out our Vectorworks page and all the other pages connected to the software of your choice. And for more software news and promotions, specials, you can find us on the usual social media, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, Instagram. And I also want to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded, and I will post it later on Vimeo and YouTube. Just search for Novedge. And now let me share Jonathan's screen so he can get started right away.
Okay, now I think I've got screen one, yep. So can you see my website and my Vectorworks, Barbara?
We sure do.
Sweet. Cool. So this is my brand new website, just opened on the weekend. If you're an old-time subscriber to my previous website, it's still going, and it's still the one where I do my online webinars and my monthly workshops and special interest groups. But this is a new one, and this is a collection or a curating of all of the movies that I've created into groups, and I'll just go to the home page so you can see it. So this is my new website. It's called, I call it the visual knowledge base. So if we look at productivity, you start typing what you're looking for and the search pops up and it tells you all the things that match that category or that area. And so I've divided up my website into things called categories: getting started, organization, annotation, and so on, architectural customizing. And today we're talking about productivity techniques, getting started. And so I'm going to use this as an aide-memoir. I'll be pushing this off to the side of my screen so I can keep looking at it. But I just wanted to show you quickly, I'm going to go through a lot of these topics here. We're going to look at using symbols instead of groups. We're going to look at tools. What kind of tools really speed up productivity? What kind of preferences should we set with Vectorworks to speed up your productivity? And what kind of workflow techniques might we use to make it quicker? Now, I've divided up the website in these nice categories or these nice sort of headings, but I'll probably be jumping around and I'll probably be combining several of them together at once. So I think this is a really cool really cool new website. It's got a different price structure to my other one. It doesn't include any online webinars. It doesn't include getting together as a group, but it's got access to nearly all of my movies, and I'm still working on it, so there are still things that I'd like to add to it. And I'll continue adding to it, and I'll continue updating movies as I realize that they need updating. So I'm just going to push that off to the side, and we're going to start talking about productivity in Vectorworks. So I just need to move things around on my screen so I can see everything and all my attendees. And I've got my questions over there as well so that I can see your questions as they come in. So number one, let's talk about drawing with objects. Now, it might seem obvious to you guys that you draw with objects, but I do meet people that want to draw a rectangle using the line tool. And I don't know if you guys have ever counted it, but it takes 8 clicks to create a rectangle with the line. Whereas if you use the rectangle tool, you can create a rectangle in just 2 clicks. But notice something else that I've created. When you notice that I've created a rectangle, you might notice that it's got a solid fill to it. Now this is happening as part of your attributes palette. So one of my techniques is to make sure my attributes palette is set so that it's got a solid fill with a thin line around it. Usually I use a black line because that's the most common pen that I use. It might not seem like a productivity thing, but down here I've got some rectangles that I've created without using a fill. Now in order to select them, I've got to go to their very edge, click on them. When I come into the middle of them, I can't select them. Whereas these objects, I can select them anytime just by clicking in the middle, and that speeds me up. Now, I know that when you have to do a lot of thinking, your brain uses glucose. I like not to do too much thinking, so I like to make it easy for myself. So one of the things is make sure you draw with objects, make sure you draw with solid fills. That'll speed you up enormously. Now, I've started off with a template. This is my template, and when I start my template, it automatically comes with a site plan layer, a floor layer. It automatically comes with a series of classes that I've got set up. And these classes have been set up to represent certain building materials, but also, for example, I've got timber here. It has a particular color and line weight associated to it, so that when I draw an object in that class, it automatically picks up the right color and the right line weight. Now, while we're talking about classes, I didn't actually include this on my website as a productivity technique, so I figure I better in the future. When we create a class, we create a new class, what we want to do is to be able to choose a class that we've reused previously. So I've actually got this open on my website on the other screen. I'm just going to find something that I'm looking for. Okay, so if anyone's used my or bought my architect, my BIM architect or my BIM landmark courses, I've given you a whole lot of resource files, and one of them that I've given you is this ArchonCAD standards. It's a standards file that contains all of my layers and classes, and when I want to create a new class, I can pick a class from a list that I've got here previously. Now recently we looked at auto hybrid with my group. I can bring in those classes for auto hybrid automatically. Now I don't put them as part of my template because I may not always want those classes in my file for every project, but it's really quick for me to create them and bring them in. So I think that's a productivity technique. It makes it really useful. Now I'm going to start, we've talked about layers and classes, but I'm going to start by looking at the tool, which is this one here, the selection tool. And you might be thinking, surely everybody knows how to use this tool. But a lot of people don't realize the subtlety of these options at the top here. So if I disable interactive scaling, I get a little warning dialog box, which I can turn off so I'll never see it again. And you'll notice that I've lost my handles around this object. But unfortunately, it doesn't just lose the handles around this object. It loses the handles around all of your objects, including things like the call-out tool. Jane, if you ever put the plant tag on, you lose the handles around that too. So maybe it's better if you use this one here, the single interactive scaling mode. If you use the multiple, then when you select multiple objects, you can reshape all of them. And I find that can be awkward when you're trying to move it. And I find this one, the single interactive, the best. Because if I select multiple objects, then I can move them. And if I select one object, I can reshape it or rescale it. So let's look again at selecting objects. Drag our marquee. If we totally enclose objects, they're all selected. If we touch objects, they're not selected, unless we put our finger on the Option or the Alt key. And that will select multiple objects. Very quick, but also slightly dangerous. Now we're going to have an object on top here. So what's another technique that's really useful is the B key. The B, one of my students said, call it, Jonathan, B for behind, because you can see what's behind. Fair enough. So it's called the Xray mode, and it allows you to see objects through other objects. Extremely useful. I use it all the time. Last night I used it when I was trying to reshape a wall. I was trying to move a roof, and I needed to see the walls underneath. Hold down the B key, you can see right through it. So if you're doing landscaping, you might have landscape areas, you still want to see through it. Hold the B key down, and you can see right through it. So let's go back to seeing everything. I'm going to send that to the back, which is a keyboard shortcut. So if I just send something to the back with a keyboard shortcut. So again, let's look at keyboard shortcuts. Modify on the menu bar. Here are my keyboard shortcuts. If I want to group objects, there's my shortcut. If I want to ungroup it, there's a keyboard shortcut. If I want to send things behind, send to front, send to back. I don't use send forward and send backwards, so I don't even know what the keyboard shortcuts are. Rotate, there's another one. You might think this is weird, but the rotate, I can remember what rotate left is, but I really struggle to remember rotate right, and so I don't bother. What I do is I just rotate it left 3 times, and it'll rotate it right for me. So I've gotten rid of that object. If you drag your marquee across this way, it doesn't make a change. So it doesn't matter whether you drag it this way or that way, it's the same effect. Now there are CAD programs where it does affect whether you drag from right to left or from left to right. Vectorworks does not. So it's the Option key, select multiple objects. This is the wall insertion mode. So if you've got a wall and you've got an object in a wall, I'm just going to create a quick wall. Let's just go back to my wall tool. So key 9 should be my wall tool. There's a wall. If I put a window in it, let's go and grab a quick window and put a window in that wall. So that window is in the wall. Now sometimes when I'm moving these walls or moving these windows around, I want to make sure I turn this off. It's off now, so I don't accidentally pull that window out of the wall. If I need to pull it out of the wall, then I turn that on, and it allows me to pull that out of the window. And if you're using things like furniture, it's quite handy to turn this off so that when you drag your furniture up and touch the wall, it doesn't jump into the wall. We can actually turn that off if we create symbols. It's quite useful. So rectangular marquee, lasso. If you've got a complex design, you might change to the lasso so that you can hold your mouse down and you can lasso certain objects without grabbing other ones. But I tend to use it in the square mode. And if you're using walls, think about using the connected walls mode. It's really powerful. So those are my default options that I use. Leave this on, I have that one, use that one, and I keep that one on. Someone's asking, why would I ever use the first mode? For me, Richard, I don't know, but it's a personal question. And there might be people who only use the first mode because they really struggle with the reshaping. They never want to reshape something. So maybe you don't want to use that. So while we're talking about these mode groups, these are called groups. There's a vertical line there. So that's group 1, vertical line. Group 2, there's a vertical line. Group 3, there's a vertical line. Group 4. So while we're talking about hotkeys or keyboard shortcuts, let's just have a look. There's the U key on your keyboard. It affects the first group. The I key activates the second group. The O key activates the third group. The P key activates the group after that. And if there's another one, it's the square bracket key. And if you look at your keyboards, you'll notice that all those keys line up with each other. They go one after the other. So that's what I just leave that, and I can use those keys. So let's also talk about, I don't teach hotkeys very often, but I do show my students where to find them. So for example, the line tool, where it's got a bracket, that's key number 2 on your keyboard. So if you hit key number 2, it'll bring up the line tool. Now I only know a handful of these things because there's too much other stuff to remember, but I remember the wall tool, which is key 9. I remember 1, which is text, 2, which is lines, 4, which is rectangles, and I can't remember most of the others, but I know that 9 is walls. And if you're drawing walls, think about using this technique, the rectangle mode for drawing walls. It is really quick. So before I can show you my next trick with walls, I need to talk to you about this option here, which is the auto join walls. This is part of your quick preferences group up here. Now I've only got 3 preferences turned on. By default, Vectorworks has a bunch that I don't like, so I turn them off. They're all controlled by this arrow. So auto join walls, click there again. So things like black and white only, I don't use that very often. I don't want to see my default options here, but I want to see my clip cube. And I also like this one here, show other objects while in groups. So if I group objects, I can see stuff outside the group or not, depending on whether I want to. So those are quite useful. This is zoom line thickness, show clip cube, and this is where I can get to all my preferences. So someone's just asked me, do I customize this default menu to my choices? And I've forgotten which menu I was looking at when I did it. I don't tend, so Jane, I don't tend to customize these menus too much, but I do customize this one, the right click. And I change this quite a lot. So that's the right click when you're away from everything. And this is the right click when I go near something. So these ones down the bottom, the join, remove, break, and so on, these are contextual items which change depending on the object you click on. You notice they're different there, and they're different there. But I also change and add things to these columns. I'm just going to go back to my workspaces and see if I haven't got my own one here. So we will talk later on about customizing these, because I think it's really important that you customize your Vectorworks. So a couple of things that, while we're talking about preferences, let's go back to this. So we've got document preferences, and we've got Vectorworks preferences. Now, if you're a landscaper, you'll find the document preferences really useful when you're looking at the plane shadows. So here, the plane shadows, you can set the offset to be 0.5, I guess, of the object height. So if you're using massing models or plants, this is really useful. You can set the angle, a solid color. Now, I use a solid color, which generally I use black as a solid color. And you might be thinking, well, that's a really dark shadow. What if we change the opacity, though? So if we change the opacity, we get to see through the shadow, which is what normally happens anyway. You can see through the shadow. And it's quite handy to do that. So let's do that. That won't help, or we won't see that unless I use a plant. I'm not going to, massing models, I'm not going to show those either. So what we're up to, Barbara, we're up to, I think, our preferences. So document preferences, these only affect your document. So if you save your template, any settings you put in here will be saved with your template. So drop shadows you might like, crop perspective, so on. But these are just the way that I like it. So when I've saved my template, all my document preferences have been saved along with anything else I've got in my drawing. So any symbols I've got, any classes I've got, any hatches that are in this file, they're all saved together with my template. And this is my template. And you might notice that here, I've actually got a series of utilities which make it quick for me to do things. So window, palettes, let's have a look at my snapping palette, which I think's gone on the other screen, so I'm going to have to go hunt for it. There it is. This is my snapping palette. We can have it this orientation, we can have it that orientation. I tend to teach, when I'm teaching Vectorworks, I tend to teach it that orientation because there are hotkeys for each of these. This is key A, S, D, and F. And if you look at your keyboard, those keys are all in a line. And this is Q, W, E, and R. And those are the snaps I leave on all the time, unless I need something special. If you double click on one of these snaps, it'll open, and I'm going to turn that off. It'll open up this Smart Cursor Settings dialog box where you've got access to quite a lot of detail about these Smart Cursor settings. So I can choose not to snap to the midpoint of an edge, or the center point, or the quadrant points, or insertion points, or the nearest point on an edge. And if I do that, when I come to dimension, it'll be a lot easier for me to dimension because my dimensions will snap easily to the ends of my objects. And I won't accidentally snap to a point along the line where I wouldn't want to put a dimension. Now, if I do this on a regular basis, what would be nice is to save these settings. So what I might do is to only have those two turned on, adjust these depending, I've double clicked on it, so adjust those ones, and then save these settings. And the way we save them is to go to Tools on the menu bar, use Custom Tool or Attribute, and tell Vectorworks to remember my Smart Cursor settings, and it will save this as a custom tool. Now, I've already done it, and it's this one here, Snaps for Dimensioning. Double click on that, and you can see my grid's gone, Snaps for designing, this has come back. Let's just have a look. I may have made a change to that. Notice that all these have come back. Let's double click on this. All of those options have come back. What have I done with my grid? Show grid should be turned on. And if I double click on snaps for dimensioning, my grid turns off, some of my snaps turn off, and I turn off lots of these as well. So it's really handy to have those turn on and off depending on whether I want them or not. And it's saved now, so I can double click here, double click there, and it will just save those for me, make it very easy to get to. I've got a lot of other ones here, and we'll get to these later. These ones really help me when I'm doing my detailing. And I've also got a reset command here. If I double click on my reset, it resets everything for me, and it resets about 80 or 90 preferences. It's just a huge chunk that it resets. Really handy. So let's have a look at our Vectorworks preferences, because they're really handy as well. So Vectorworks preferences, let's have a look. What have we got here? We've got edit. So when we edit things, what do we want to do? And one of the things I tend to do is to make sure that this one here, allow control click in place duplication, is turned on. I like that. Some people don't. You need to change these preferences depending on the way you draw. I believe these are personal. Some things that I like to do, lots of other people don't. I've got one client who loves click drag drawing. I really struggle with it. Fine. If you like it, turn it on. I don't like it, but you might. Try them out and see what you think. 8 selection handles, I like that. Some people might not like it. Offset duplications is really useful. So display, what sort of things do we want to display? Do we want to display light objects all the time or only on wireframe? And you might have to change these depending on your situation. I was drawing a house last night and I had to turn this to always because I wanted to work in a rendered view and still see my 3D loci, so I needed to change that. What about a session? I don't like sound. I used to, I don't anymore, so I've got to turn that off. And it's actually set here in one of my reset commands, and I need to fix it. We've got lots of options here. As I said, they really depend on your personal preferences. But one thing I would say is turn on autosave. Now, I autosave every 15 operations. I don't confirm it. It just automatically backs up to a custom location, and I keep the last 5 most recent backups. Why the last 5? Because I never know whether, one of them is going to suit me, or whether I've lost information. So sometimes you make a change, you make a design decision, you realize you've made a mistake, Vectorworks crashes, you got to go back to an earlier one. So I keep 5. I mean, really, when you think about it, hard drives are cheap. What's wrong with keeping 5? But also, keeping them all in one location is extremely useful. It is really, really useful to have one place to look for your backups. And when I get too many in there, I've only got one folder to go to, and I can select everything in that folder, and I can just put it in the rubbish bin or the trash can and clean out my hard drive really quickly. So it can be quite handy. So I've looked at preferences, I've looked at those objects, we've looked at. Okay, so what are a couple of techniques? Right click, add surface, so useful. Now this technique only works if you draw with objects. So again, you should draw with objects because it works really well. This is made out of lines, and it's really awkward. I can't find the area of that object, of that rectangle, because they're 4 individual lines. I can't add it together. I can't clip it. If I go back, I can also go clip surface, and it'll take one away from the other. The front one takes a bite out of the one behind it. It's really useful. So those are functional. Those become useful because of your ability to do because you've drawn with objects. So I think I can get rid of those. I've done that. Right click. I can't compose, and I can't. There's a command I use all the time. This one up here. Select connected objects. I think it's really useful because it finds all objects that join together. And I think it should be part of the right click, but it's not. So since I think it should be, I'm going to click on my utility menu, and I'm going to customize my workspace. So my workspace editor is on the other screen. I'll just drag it in. So I'm going to call this ArchonCAD because this is my workspace. And we've got basic tools. I'm not going to worry about the basic tools. I'm not going to worry about the tool sets yet. But if I want to, I could actually get rid of some of the tools that I know I never use. I never use the spiral. What's the point? I don't use the regular polygon, but I might need it, so I'll hide it under that one. I use the double polygon sometimes, and maybe I don't use marionette, so I can delete that. So these are just, and if I ever want to bring those back, I can go to all tools, I can scroll down till I find marionette. It's all alphabetical. There's marionette. I can drag and put that back if I really want to. But what I really want to do is to change my menus. So this is my object context. This is when I right click on an object, and this is my document context when I right click in space. Now paste has got a keyboard shortcut, which I know, so I'm going to get rid of that. Copy and paste, these, I've got the keyboard shortcuts for these. I don't need those. So I can just remove them and save myself some space. Activate class, I don't use that very often. I don't use activate layer. Force select, I sometimes use, it's a really handy one. Create similar object, I don't need that because there's a keyboard shortcut for it. Select coincident objects, I've got a keyboard shortcut for that as well. But the things I do miss, I need a separator for these, so let's put in a separator. Compose and decompose, these are under the modify menu, I think. Compose, I like compose. I like decompose, it'll break things into little components. I also like one called select connected objects. There it is there, select connected objects. Let's put that one there. And I'm going to save this, so let's just go okay. I'll get a dialog box telling me where I've saved it. Yeah, don't show that again either. So customizing your workspace is a really powerful technique for speeding up what you do. You can actually make Vectorworks, or make it easy to find the tools that you love to use, and you can get rid of the tools that you don't use very often. So I use it a lot. So it's just thinking at the moment. We finished. Cool. So right click, select connected objects. So all those lines that touched each other are now selected. Right click again and compose. And now it's a solid object. So those two techniques, you know, the ability, or those two commands that I added, select connected objects and compose, I use those together to create the result that I want. These ones here, I told you about these ones. I find them really hard to select, so you've got to be so careful about it. So let's add surface, and I need to make that solid to make it useful. So I can get rid of that. I can get rid of those. I'm just going to undo these. This is some people call this the magic wand, the select similar tool. How similar is this object? Well, let's have a look at our settings. I use this tool a lot. I'm going to select objects based on their type. So it's an object. I sometimes select things based on their object and class. Object and class. So I've done that. What about sometimes I choose things just based on their class. Okay, so I've saved 3 of those. So now when I go up here, I can choose object. Click on that, chooses all my dimensions. I'm going to put this dimension onto a different class so that we can see it. Should we put it onto, oh, where's my navigation palettes? Lost my object. So that object there. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong place, sorry. And now I seem to have class options, shows that modify others. Be careful of that one can catch you out. So here, this is not on the dimension class. I want that on the none class, so I can show you this tool. So the select similar tool, object. Selects all objects that are the same type of object. Class selects all objects that are on the same class. An object and class, it has to be the same kind of object and the same class. You notice it doesn't choose all of my dimensions. So I can get rid of those. Now I did talk to you about the auto join tool, and that's because when you draw walls, if you have auto join turned on, it does a great job of joining your walls together. And the trim tool now works with walls, so you can use it to trim that one. So you can use it to trim walls if you like. Really quick. Becomes very quick to use that. So let's get rid of all of that. How are we getting on for time, Barbara? Are we doing all right? So symbols or groups. What's best? Well, let's start with, I'm going to use this as an example. It's just a table and chairs. I'm not going to worry about all the classes on that. And I want to create an array of those. So edit, duplicate array. We're going to have a rectangular array. We're going to put 10 of those in one direction, 10 in the other direction. We're going to have them distance between columns 4 meters, and distance between rows 4 meters, and OK. So I've now got 100 of these things. Let me save my file. So I'm just going to save this to my desktop. I didn't say where. Okay. Yep. So I've saved it somewhere. So where have I saved it? Let's have a look. So we have get info. Where's get info? Down the bottom. File info here. So this file info will tell me how big my file is. Now with just these things in it, it's nearly 12 megabytes. So let's undo that. We've got that one object. I'm going to make this object into a symbol. So modify and create symbol. Now symbols have a productivity all of their own. We can use symbols to repeat things. We can copy them from one file to another because they're symbols. But also there's a lot of subtlety with a symbol. Do we want the symbol to insert into a wall or not? We can actually choose that symbol by symbol. So I have electrical objects. Some of them don't insert into a wall. Toilet fixtures do not insert into a wall. But a light switch might insert into a wall. And the reason I might insert a light switch into a symbol is so when I move my wall, my switch goes with it. So switches, what do you call them? Power receptacles, power points. We can also choose to assign this to a particular class if we want. So we can say that when we use this class, it's going on the class called furniture main. There's furniture main. Let's import that class. So you can see how handy it is to have that class structure or that standard with you, to have it connected, so that when you're drawing and you go, oh no, I just realized that would be useful to put on a class, we can get that. Table. So we're going to do table, okay, and that's now a symbol. We'll see this change to symbol in a second. Oh, we've got a dialog box. We're going to put it into default. Okay, so there we are. So that's now a symbol. Now let's do our duplicate array again. So modify, edit. Duplicate array, 10 by 10, same setting we did before. So I've now got 100 symbols. Now the beauty of this is that not only will the file size be smaller, but if I double click and edit this table, it'll update all of them and I won't have to repeat this again. So I'm going to make this 900 by 900 because it turns out it's a restaurant with 2 chairs at each side, and you can see all of them updated. So symbols have this wonderful power of every symbol or every instance that symbol is identical, and I use this technique to build my window and door elevations, which is a whole nother technique. Okay, so let's go save again and let's have a look at our file info. So I've just saved that file. Let's go down here. File info, let's have a look at it. So it's gone from 12 megabytes to 600 kilobytes. That's a huge change. So symbols are very efficient. So let's, can we use select all? Should we use object and class? It shouldn't matter. But if I select these, you'll notice that those are automatically on the class that I specified, which is a technique which makes, what's a nice way to put it? It allows you to embed your drawing system into your symbols so that when you use a symbol, it is automatically assigned to the class you want. That is a huge increase in productivity, and it means that you don't have to think about it. You can worry about where you're putting it, not what class you're putting it on, and it saves a lot of mental energy. At the beginning, Barbara said that you should have more fun when using Vectorworks, and I think it's more fun if you can think about the design more than the technique of actually putting that object in.
Amen.
So we've got object. Sorry, Barbara?
I was saying amen.
Yes. So I'm just having a look through. So I've looked at the selection tool. I haven't looked at the Reshape tool. So let's have a look at the Reshape tool. I'm just going to cut a couple of bits here and clip surface. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so the Reshape tool. So one of my techniques with the selection tool is if I want to edit an object, I double click on it. So this is text. So if I want to select or edit an object using the correct tool, double click on it. This brings up the Reshape tool. Double click on my text, brings up the text tool. So that's the simple technique of using the selection tool a lot will speed you up. Okay, the Reshape tool. So we can reshape a polygon handle. So I can reshape this. I've got to be a little careful to make sure I'm lining up horizontally. But if I use this one, the move edges parallel, I do not have to be careful. I can be as sloppy as anything, and so choose the one that's easiest for you. If you drag your marquee around an area like that, you can hit the delete key and delete all the handles that are in that area. If we select all those, put our marquee around and click and drag, we can drag all the handles that are in that area. So it becomes really useful if we use the Reshape tool. We can change the vertex type, we can add vertices, take away vertices, but I use this technique a lot with the Reshape tool. Let's go to details. So if I create a piece of timber, so where I live there, 90 by 45, I'm going to put some lines in it, and you might notice I used my hotkeys to find the line and the rectangle. So I use key 4 for the rectangle, and I use key 2 for those lines. So I select all of those, I go to my Reshape tool, drag a marquee around this corner here, and then I can drag that, and it drags both the rectangle and the lines. And that's using my Reshape tool to create the shape of timber that I want. Okay, we can get rid of all of that. Because I actually have a symbol for that. So there's my block, which is a symbol, so it's easy to get that out. But I also have some things here. For example, I can draw concrete. Now this will activate, this is a little script that I created. If I double click on it, it will create or activate a class. The class has the line weight and the hatching assigned to it. And I can now draw a polygon. So I can start over here, I can come here. What are we going to come down? A couple of 100 millimeters. We're going to go across, come up, touch that point there, and double click to stop. And you'll notice that it's already filled in my concrete hatch. It's already got the line weight that I want, and all that stuff works really quickly, and it has been assigned to the class that I want. I've got another one here for drawing a rebar. So let's start in the midpoint there. We're going to come along, going to come down. Obviously my piece of timber's my concrete's a bit small, but it draws a rebar for me. So how do I make these? First of all, we start by activating the class we want. We've got detail classes here. Let's draw a DPC. So if I draw a DPC with the line tool, a DPC, a damp-proof course, and since it's a damp-proof course, a line will be great for that. So I draw a line. So there's my line. It's on the detail DPC class. So I get used to assigning the class, choosing the tool, and then I go up to Tools on the menu bar, and I say Custom Tool or Attribute. So remember my fill, remember my pen, remember my class, and remember the tool, and then click OK. So I'm going to put this into drawing details so you'll see it, and I'm going to call it DPC. And there it is there, DPC. So now let's change this back to none on for my class. So I'm going to draw in the none class. I'm in the selection tool. So I've got selection tool, I've got the none class. I double click on DPC, click, click. It draws a line, it draws it on my detailed DPC class, and it's done. And it pops me back to my selection tool so I can do something else. So I've used this a lot. You can see here I've got a block. So I can put in my concrete block. And the reason I've got the insertion point for my block there is the next one connects to it. And you notice it only puts one block at a time because it's the way the tool works. I'm not going to show you how to edit it so it continues to place blocks. I'm going to show you how to create. So I've shown you how to create those palettes or those tools without any editing. No computer code required at all. But it's really cool to be able to do that. So those things, I think, are really productive. This ability to create these little utilities. Now, I'm going to draw my concrete again. So let's start with the concrete. This time it's going to be a little bit bigger. And finish there again. So now I'm going to put my rebar in. So that should look a little bit better. I want to put a block on top of that. And here I can choose which symbol insertion side to use. So I want to use that one. Now I want to draw, what have we got? We got draw building wrap. So I've got some building wrap to put on this building. Or I might be using a rigid air barrier. I'm not sure if I've got one for a rigid air barrier, but I've also got, so where's my building wrap? So let's draw my building wrap. Oh, too many clicks. And now I'm going to put my linear weatherboard on. So I've got a weatherboard tool here, and I'm going to start by putting that there. And I can duplicate that if I like. So how about we look at a tool called Move by Points? Another one of the tools I really like. So let's put 4 copies of that. We're going to keep the original, so we have to retain the original. And I've got a little insertion point here. Now this insertion point, this little locus point here, that was part of my symbol. So I know that if I click there, select that, move by points, click here to start, click there to finish, creates a whole lot for me. So those little loci were part of my symbol. They're the things in my symbols, the subtlety of my symbols, that makes it really quick and really easy for me to draw. So do those. I just need a piece of, I need a line for that. And I think I've got gibboard, so I can draw gibboard. And it's going up the other side, so I can go to there. Let's start that again. So draw gibboard. It started off on that side, so you click and come up here. Now I did tell you that the U key activates the first group. So if I hit the U key once, you can see I've moved across to the next drawing side. And so that's put my gibboard in for me. So that becomes really quick to draw stuff, and in this case I'm drawing details, but it's extremely quick because I've embedded some of the things that I do in here, which is really handy. Let's get rid of those. If you ever want them back again, go to Window. Let's look at our default file, script palettes. Here they are here again. And I create these macros to do all kinds of stuff like bracing and insulation calculation, stuff like that. So I'm just going to have a look at my website, make sure I've covered most of the stuff. Align and distribute. Haven't done that. Getting close to the end of time, Barbara. Are there many questions? I haven't looked at my questions.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Where do you want to start?
Can a macro be set up as a right-click command? You can, but not easily. It creates a script. What you have to do is you have to turn that script into a menu, and then you can create it. So I didn't want to get into computer programming. And someone else has asked, how come you don't use the plugin Detail Cut Wood? To put it bluntly, I don't like it. And I don't like it because I don't think it's, I created my library before we had the Detail Cut Wood option. So I've actually got in my library all the pieces of timber that I'm likely to use. And you can see they're all there, fascias. So things like the Detail Cut Wood doesn't do a baseboard object. It doesn't do this kind of timber object like this. It doesn't do a door style. It doesn't do these other cells. So you need some of these anyway. But I created these in the before we had the Detail Cut Wood, and so they're symbols. If I bring this one in, now the Detail Cut Wood doesn't. It's a personal habit, of course. It's personal to me. But you notice my wiggly lines look a little bit like I drew them by hand, whereas the Detail Cut Wood, it has that very computer curvy line. But there's probably another reason. I'm just going to see if I can customize. And I'll explain. Let's have a look. Tools. I haven't this is a newish computer, so I haven't installed my own custom tools. But the reality is I've actually got a custom tool that I use for my my wood, and the one that I've created allows you to grab hold of that and just drag it and scale it to suit. And I found the detail cut wood object, you had to type the size and you couldn't just drag it. You couldn't just drag it to fit a hole. So I made my own. I made my own before the detail cut wood came out, and that's why I use it. Any other questions? I think that answers most of them. A quick question. I've noticed that you've used the Mac and Windows. Which one do you think is more stable? I don't really think I've got an answer for that. I can make. I was working on a project last night, and I managed to make my Macintosh crash consistently. Every time I tried to update a viewport, it would just crash. And I don't think that's to do with the Macintosh as opposed to the Windows machine. Some things, and I think what it was I used an old symbol. When I deleted the old symbol and I made some changes to the model, it worked much better. So I think it was probably something I did to the model that made it unstable. Let me just have a look. A rotate plan, haven't done that yet. It's a really powerful one. So we've got a project. Let's draw a project. It's like this, and we've got some walls that come off at an angle, like this. And what we really want to do is rotate our plans. We use this one. Click there, we rotate that view. But the second part of this productivity technique is to save that as a view. So if we save this a view and I'll call it East Wing. East Wing. And let's have a look. So we'll go back to a top plan view. We'll zoom out. So we're looking at the whole thing. Now let's draw the East Wing. So quick. It will also save classes and layers that you've set. So you can set that up as part of your saved view. We're running out of time. We're not going to cover everything. I've talked about customizing Vectorworks to make it easier. We talked about the right mouse click. I haven't covered creating objects from shapes, or I've talked about keyboard shortcuts. So there's still more stuff on my website that I haven't covered, but I think, Barbara, perhaps it's nearly time to wrap up, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. So many useful tips. Oh my gosh.
So the last thing I'll do is align and distribute. So I have a few of these. Let's create a bunch of them. And we select those, and we go up to modify, and we choose align, and we choose align and distribute. Now, I know that the landscape is a view. Sometimes you have trouble getting your plant tags to line up. Try that one. It's really cool. I'm just going to look at align and distribute. So what do we want? We want to align left. So that'll actually take all of these objects here, all of these rectangles, and move them all across to the leftmost object. Let's undo that. Let's do that again. Align and distribute. So if I go right, it aligns all of those objects to the rightmost object. But there's also a right mouse click. So if I right mouse click here and I choose align and distribute and align right, the object that I've clicked on will stay in place, and all the other objects will be aligned to the right of that. So let's go align and distribute and align right. It's kind of a cool trick, isn't it? Particularly if some of these are weird like that. So let's do that again. So we're going to go right click and align, distribute, and align to the right. So that one works really well. It's under the right mouse click, makes it really quick to get to. So there's another question that's come up. I have a Mac when updating viewports, the machine constantly crashed. Vectorworks Tech found a bug in the viewport. Yeah, and it was a faulty symbol, I think, was my problem as well. I'm not being able to create those shortcuts you use with the custom tool attribute. It's not creating the line with the same attributes. So let's go back over that quickly. You have to make sure you choose the right class. Where's my class detail and detail and flashing? So set the class up here first, choose the line tool, then tools, custom tool attribute, save those settings, and this is going into my drawing details, and it's second flashing. Let's bring that back. Script palettes, drawing details, second flashing. So let's make that back. So let's put that back to none. Where's none gone? None. Click and that tool. So let's go second. Let's go second flashing. Click, click. Let's end up on my none class. Let's do that again. It's ending up on the none class for me. What have I done wrong? I know these ones work, so that one I've created works. It's ending up on the right class. It's a polygon. Just be careful when you do this. Make sure that you've set your classes correctly. So make sure you've got it on the right class. Make sure that you've got your class also set correctly. So here, where I go to my flashing class, this one here, if we edit that, you should see that my flashing class has got user creation turned on. Make sure you got that turned on, and then it should work for you. And I think that's probably all we have time for, Barbara. Do you want to take control again, Barbara?
Yes, thank you so much, Jonathan.
See it. So this is my new website, ArchonCAD.
Yes,
www.archoncad.com. And I'm pretty happy with what I've got so far. It's a work in progress. As people suggest topics that should be included, I'm going to include them. So there's a getting started area. So it has things about getting started, about using selection snapping, controlling graphics and dimensions. If the article is useful, please give it a green tick and say, yes, it was useful. And if it wasn't, please tell me why it wasn't useful. I've had some people just tick, no, it wasn't useful. Turns out they weren't a subscriber, so they couldn't even see what was in the article. Or it wasn't helpful because they couldn't see it, or was there something else that was wrong? So I'd like everyone to be, obviously, I'd like everyone to be a subscriber. I think you'll find it really useful. I think you'll find there's a lot of information here, and I think you'll find over the year that I keep adding to this and building it up, and it's going to become a phenomenal resource for using Vectorworks effectively.
Especially because all the knowledge
so Barbara,
base.
That's it. It's up to you now.
Yes, I'll take the screen back, but I want to point out that the knowledge base is visual, which is a great plus.
Barbara, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I hope everybody can hear.
Barbara's taking control again.
I took control. I hope you guys can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you now, Barbara.
Okay,
sorry,
cool.
I have my microphone turned down.
Okay.
Sorry, the speaker was.
Okay. No, I was pointing out that the great thing is that the knowledge base is visual. So I think that's a great plus. Sorry, I just maximized my screen. I hope you can see my slide. And remember, if you missed something or you want to rewatch this webinar, which I think would be necessary given the huge amount of tips that you were exposed to in this hour. So you can watch it again on Vimeo and YouTube as early as this afternoon. Thank you for attending. And this is the product page where you can find the entire line of Vectorworks products, Novedge.com. And you can find us also on all the social media. And thanks again for joining us today. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Have a great Valentine's Day for you today and for everybody else tomorrow. Bye-bye. Have a great day. Bye.